Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Rising LinkedIn Live session. Today, we're going to cover compensation and variable pay in the second half 2020 release. We look forward to engaging with all of you. Feel free to put questions in as we're talking, and we'll try to address them either as we're going along or certainly before we end the call. I'd like to introduce myself. I've been with Rizing and before that ASON, which is one of the companies that merged to form Rizing, for over 10 years now. And I've been working with compensation and variable pay throughout that time. And I'm really excited about this release and all the things we're going to tell you about today. And I'd also like to introduce Gail Persson. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, actually.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Gail Persson, and I've been with Rizing and ASON for about 8 years, working with compensation and variable pay and performance with lots of clients throughout the world. So it's fun. And I'm looking forward to this release, too. I think there's a lot of really cool things in it. As Bryan and I were talking before we started, that there's a lot more in this release for a year's in release than we normally see. But we think there's a lot of neat things that you might want to take a look at because they might want to be something you might want to use in this upcoming release that upcoming comp cycle that you're working with. So Bryan's going to start us off and tell us about some really cool things that are happening with compensation statements. So Bryan, you take it away.
All right, I will. As Gail mentioned, there's a lot of things we're going to recommend here that you do take advantage of as soon as possible. There's a few items, too, that as we've gotten to use them a little bit, so we might recommend that you actually wait on as well. So we'll try to bring those up. And again, with your questions and things, feel free to ask us about our particular recommendations for how much you utilize any of these items. The very first item we're going to talk about is compensation statements. A great improvement in the way that standard statements can be now formatted. We've had standard statements available to us for about 5 years, and they've always had letter text over on the left side of the statement and then a data table on the right with all of your variables. We still have that available to us, but we now can actually switch that around so that the data tables are on the left side and the letter text on the right. And even more, I think the format that a lot of people may move to is where the full letter text is on the top, and it's the full width of the page. So you get an actual letter, and then underneath the letter is where the data table will be. So we like that idea. If you utilize standard statements rather than custom statements, you have some options. In addition, they brought back the option that you can either have the statement with a little bit of header information, such as the person's name, title, division, I believe, or title and employee ID. That can be at the top as part of one of the standard statement formats, or you can have that without that at the top if you prefer. In addition, these are available for both variable pay and combined statements as well. There's not quite as many choices there, but there are some other formats available there. So we think this is something you should take advantage of if you're using standard statements. Everything else about the statement is the same. It's just the actual formatting. We also, of course, utilize custom statements for a lot of our customers. If there's more needed than just the formatting changes that SuccessFactors is providing, there's also, of course, the capability to do custom statements where you actually configure the format and the data and the conditional logic within the statement separately outside of SuccessFactors in an XSL template. Anyway, that's what we think the most exciting option of the statements, but there's a couple others too. Both the compensation statement and bonus notifications now can be accessible directly from the homepage. So you don't have to have people go to their profile to see something, or managers go to a completed form. If you prefer, you can actually put a notification on the homepage where the employee can actually just be notified that there's statements available on the, and just click on the tile on the homepage and go directly to their statement. So it's a nice way to distribute it. It's also, those tiles are set up as notifications that will last 30 days. So it's sort of similar to the to-do functionality that's always been part of the homepage, and something that will be exciting. However, this is one of those we really don't recommend that you actually put this into place this release. We would recommend that you wait until the next release, only because this relies upon the new homepage, the reimagined homepage. And the reimagined homepage will be in all instances in the next release, the 2021 first half release. But in this release, it's considered optional, and it's really an early adopter type of thing. And there are things that we feel like it's certainly you're welcome to do that in your test instance, but we would not recommend with the short time frame that we have between now and the next few months, when most companies at the end of the year will be doing their compensation planning. There really won't be enough time, we feel, to get that ready for a production environment. Now, again, those are our recommendations. It's, certainly don't have to abide by those completely, but it's what we've seen so far and what we would recommend. There is one other item, though, Gail, with statements before I turn it back over to you, I wanted to mention. There's an enhancement that you can now have a deep link directly to the completed folder, the completed folder on your compensation page. What's that mean? Well, it means that deep link can be configured in various places in the system, from a profile, from a homepage tile, from other form templates, any place where you can put hyperlinks and configure hyperlinks. You can now put a link directly to the completed folder. So the use case for this is managers in particular, lots of times will access their statements by going to the completed form and being able to use that bulk print functionality within the completed form. And if that is used by a lot of your managers, you really should look into being able to take them directly to those completed forms with one of these hyperlinks, most commonly probably on a homepage tile. Does that make sense to you too, Gail? Is that where you're envisioning that they would use that?
Yeah, I think that will be a nice option to, instead of giving all kinds of instructions out, to get to the completed folder to find those statements. So, all right. Well, I have a few things, some new form functionality to share. The first one is something that I've already started working with, the ability to create or use custom fields in eligibility rules. Up to this point, when you set up eligibility rules, it was only on standard fields that you could create someone to be eligible or ineligible for in the eligibility rules screen. Well, now there is a new checkbox on the field setup in the worksheet design, where you can set up at least up to 20 custom columns or custom fields to be then available in the eligibility screen. So you have to set them up as reportable, but then you check this little checkbox that they're part of eligibility, and then can go set up that eligibility rule. It will really come into good use if you are setting up budgets based on a custom, like a percentage of a custom field, because now that eligibility as to who's eligible or not, that can all be set up, and it'll show with those budget totals that way. So a real nice feature there. Like I said, I've been playing with it, and I think it's really gonna help a lot of people out. Another one that is just a kind of a visual thing. A few releases ago, they introduced where you could put groups of things on your worksheet. So you could group the employee information, the merit information, whatever, and you could expand or collapse them, and you could have them show that way. Well, when you would collapse them, you could only show one column, so you had to pick out which column you wanted to show when it's collapsed. Well, now you can configure it to show multiple columns when it's collapsed. So you might have a grouping that has 10 columns in it. So you can now maybe pick your top three to five that you want to show, and then maybe automatically have that collapsed, and then they only need to expand it if they really need to see those extra fields. So I think it can kind of really help clean up a very busy worksheet and make sure that you're showing your planners exactly what you want them to see. Another one, which is, I think it's probably getting a big thumbs up from everybody, is you can now show 100 employees per page on a worksheet. The default before was 50. So it was kind of, if you had a very large worksheet and, had to keep paging through, it can kind of be tiresome. So now you can at least show 100 per page. And the other part of this enhancement too is that you can also decrease. So if you have set it to the, the default to be, say, 50 or 100, you can now, as a user, select to show less if you want on that worksheet as well. So just up to the individual that's using that worksheet. So something that's probably been something people have wanted for quite a while. And the last one that I have to talk about is just an updated budget information, the little budget box for the total comp worksheets. Up until this point, the budget on a total comp just looked a little bit different. I think the total column and the total percentage column were two separate columns. Well, now they've grouped those together. So it mirrors what you would see in a budget box on a comp or a variable pay template as well. So just kind of bringing that so that they all kind of look familiar. So, but that's all I've got with form functionality. Brian, anything new with executive review this time?
Two items. Both, none of them are huge, but they're both nice things to have. The first one is when you go to executive review, you're presented with the list of templates that you are permissioned to see. And if you're a customer that's been using SuccessFactors for a long time, you may have a long list of templates. Let's say you've been using it for 5 years and you do both compensation and variable pay, salary and bonus planning. So you have 10 templates for the last 5 years. You'll see that list of 10 templates. And if you want to get to the current year, you've always had to scroll down to the bottom. I shouldn't say always, almost always, because almost everybody names their templates with the year first, and it was always sorted alphabetically. So 2015, 2016, 17, on down to 2020, you had to scroll down to the bottom to get to the 2020. This enhancement's very simple. It allows the user to do reverse sorting. So they can say, no, I want to see that in the reverse order. And as soon as they do that one time, it's sticky, it will stay with them. So yes, so it'll allow them to be able to select most likely the very top template in the list when you go into executive review. So again, very minor change, but I think something people will really like.
The little things are best.
Yeah. The second item is used less, but when it is used, this one's going to be very useful. For those of you that have ever used offline editing refers to if I have the ability to export out of executive review, I can do that and then take that Excel file, make changes within that Excel file, and import my changes back in. Not that many customers have used that over the years, in part because things can go wrong when you have that Excel file and it's difficult to get it back in without there being error messages thrown. So typically it's really only been used by admins or potentially some HR and not your line management doing that type of offline editing. The problem has always been that if you gave people the ability to edit online within executive review and you turned on this offline editing capability, those same people could always do the offline editing as well. Now this enhancement, again, very simple enhancement, but I think one that could be valuable for companies that might want to use this, is you can now separate out the permissions. So you can allow admins, as an example, to be able to do the offline editing and import data back in. But everybody else that does only online editing, you don't have to give them permissions. So they can still do exports, they can still look at it in Excel, but they're not going to be able to take that, make changes and import it back in. So just separate out the exporting and importing permissions for offline. And again, I think there's some customers that haven't used this in the past because of the limitations of the permissions, that now you might want to rethink that at times. Because as an admin, if you ever have had to go in and update 50 or more merit increases, and you have to make sure you do every one of those right and don't mess up and do a typo and give somebody an extra something or take away something, you can now do that all in Excel, check it much better, and do those imports back in. So I think it'll be really valuable, again, for some of you. I hope anyway. Gail, I'm going to turn it back over to you. Those are really the only two items with executive review. And I know you wanted to talk about rewards and recognition.
Yes. Yeah, they've made some wonderful improvements to the reward and recognition. And actually, they've indicated that they have an initiative to do some more updates to the reward and recognition, which will be awesome. The first one that I'd like to talk about is a new program type of a thank you award, which is just that, just something that can say thank you. And I know I've worked with several clients that have wanted to do just this type of thing, but the only options were to either set up, a monetary or a points-based program, which also required you to have a guideline and a budget holder, etc. So now there's this new program type, so you don't have to do those things. You don't have to have a currency related to it or anything. It just basically allows the employees to nominate others and send them a thank you, and just show recognition that way. So I think that will be very well used by anybody that's using the reward and recognition program. The other thing is just kind of a total update of the look and feel of the screens itself, the reward and recognition homepage, the nomination screen, all of that. They've updated it and kind of smoothed out the process, so it's a little bit more user intuitive as to where you're supposed to go and how you're supposed to use the screen. In addition, they've also the old process used to require you to click on the next button to take you to the next step. Or no, the new process will take you to have you click on a next button to take you to the next step. I said that backwards. It previously would automatically take you to the next step, and so this way you're you're walking yourself through that process. And the last thing that they've changed with the reward and recognition is they've added a cropping editor. So when you upload your images to put on your plan types, little logos or pictures or whatever it is you want to put on your plan type. Previously, you'd had to, crop them outside the system and get them to the right perspective before you got them in there. So now when you load them, you can actually crop them and get them so that they look right in the required ratio that you need when you're showing those on the screen. So just something to make it a little bit easier. But I did like the one comment in the updates that said that there's an initiative to improve the overall user experience for the reward and recognition. So, we may be seeing some more changes to that in the future. So, but I think these will work for now. So, but I know, Bryan, you have some things up your sleeve to tell people about that are working with promotions maybe during their planning cycles.
I do. There are a couple of things about promotions I want to talk about. By the way, one other thing about the rewards and recognition that we've talked about, Gail, not that many customers have really taken advantage of it on a regular basis. And it's really a program that we would recommend that you consider. Just put it into your test instance. If you're not an Employee Central customer, there might be a little bit of a learning curve with some of the metadata framework objects, but we can help you through all that. And it's not a significant learning curve. And the program, they really have enhanced it a lot over the last year or two. So, promotions. There are a few items I'm going to talk about, but there's just one really in particular. If you are an EC customer, that I think is really a good improvement and a necessary improvement. Employee Central customers can do promotions, of course, at any time throughout the year. So those of the Employee Central customers that do the promotion planning during the focal cycle, it's typically in addition to the promotions that you would do off cycle as well. And the capabilities within SuccessFactors during the compensation planning is that we can allow you to pop up a window where somebody filling out all of the data involving for a promotion recommendation is the exact same window that they would do in an off-cycle situation. We call it EC Promotion Pop-Up. And the EC Promotion Pop-Up, we have a number of customers that do utilize it. And it's great because it's the same user experience for recommending a promotion. And the way that that ends up working for those of you that aren't using this functionality is after the process has been completed, all of those get published back to Employee Central, and whatever workflows are there for approvals can either be turned on or off. It's up to you whether you want to go through that same workflow approval, excuse me, or whether the actual focal planning process is effectively been enough for the approval. Well, all of this has worked great, except during the planning process, there's never been a way to report on whoever's been recommended for a promotion and any of the data that has been filled out, such as what's their new title, what's their new grade, what's any other information about their position that they'd be moving to, and so on. That is now reportable. There is a promotion report available. It's, interestingly enough, not within the report center. It's actually within the admin area on the manage worksheets page of compensation admin. And it will allow you to see during the planning process what promotions are out there. You've always been able to see it before, by the way. It just had to be one at a time. You had to go into executive review, typically look for everybody that's had a promotion recommended and look at them one at a time. Now you can do a report. So that's probably the primary one with promotions. There is a couple of them that I'll just go through real quickly. One of them is the ability to use other things to determine what the new pay range should be when you are promoting somebody. That was introduced, I think, just last release. And now in this release, they're allowing you as administrators to configure that and maintain that. So for those of you that use pay ranges, you know that SuccessFactors drives that primarily off of the pay grade of an individual, but it could also include things like their geozone or their region or their country. It could potentially include things like their function or division or legal entity or something. There's other options or other variables that could be part of that pay range lookup. You now as an administrator can maintain what you would want to use for those people that are being promoted to a new pay grade and potentially go into a different geozone or a different business function or whatever it may be. In addition to that, there is, if you have not used promotions before as part of your focal planning and are ready to, whether you're an Employee Central customer or not, the ability to configure that and set that up is much easier. There's a single checkbox now that will allow you as an administrator to say, I want to allow promotions. And depending upon whether you're an Employee Central customer or not, it will then set up certain things and certain processes in certain fields on the form. You may not want to use all those. You may want to move them around. So the way that SuccessFactors will set that up is just the starting point. We can certainly help you after that if desired to actually get it to work exactly like you would like. I think that's it. The one other item I know at the end we wanted to cover potentially a list of administrative functions. But Gail, I think you wanted to talk about the variable pay.
There's one new enhancement to the variable pay, and it's a new experience for the employees to view their bonus information, and it's called the Enhanced Individual Variable Pay View, which it's kind of an opt-in. You have to set it up in the company settings, and it's to me it kind of gives you more of a view of it, more of a graphical view of your bonus information. So there are some other permissions, role-based permissions that have to be set on it too, depending on how you're using it. But it can be accessed through the home page, or it could be accessed through the profile as well, the employee profile. So just kind of a refreshed look, I guess, of that individual variable pay view. So something to maybe help them understand their bonus information a little bit better. So
don't you think the look and feel, Gail, is a little bit more like the compensation profile that you get to?
Right. Yes, exactly. It looks like the compensation profile. So a little more of that Fiore look, right. Throughout the system. So yeah,
I really think it is much nicer looking.
Yes. Oh, yes. It needed a facelift. So, but I know we do have some admin things to talk about as well. Brian, did you want to start with a couple?
I will. we'll probably take, what, 3 or 4 or 5 minutes maybe just to go through these. These are not things that affect your end users. They're things that help those of you that are administrators, which actually there's probably quite a few of you are administrators. And none of them, again, are earth-shattering, but a number of them I think you're going, oh, this is nice. It sure is nice to have this. The first one, if you have field-based permissions and you use particular groups, so you might have, for example, your HR and HR business partners have different permissions for some fields on the form than your planners would have, or maybe compensation admins.
Mhm.
You want to see salary range and comp ratio information, but you don't want your planners to. You can set up these different field-based permission groups. If you have field-based permission groups that have a large number of people in them, you've always been able to filter, just like you can with any other type of permission group. But if you can't define it with filters and you actually just need to specify individual people or individual user IDs, you've always had to just type them in one at a time and build your list that way. And each year, as you go through, you have to realize these 4 people have terminated and we have 7 new people, and you have to maintain the list online one at a time. Well, now you have the ability to import. So you can take a simple CSV file with a list of user IDs and use that to populate your members of a particular field-based permission group. We've always had this in other parts of the system, just haven't had it in field-based permissions yet. So that would be one nice one. A second one is for those of you that are using Employee Central and you publish back the results of your planning process into Employee Central, you now have the capability to filter one more way. Up until either last release or I think maybe a year ago's release, you could only publish everything or nothing. So you had to just publish everything and hope it all worked, because if not, there was no easy way to remove everything. And then in a recent release, they added the ability to publish one employee at a time, or even all of the employees on one form at a time. Now we have something even in between that and publishing everything, where you can filter on particular filter fields. So I could do by country, for example. I could publish the US today, and I can publish Europe next week, and Canada the following week, and APAC a month from now. Or however I want to set that up. I could also filter on other things, such as, again, division, functional group, those types of things. So it's nice. It allows us to publish a subset without having to publish everything or just publish one at a time. And then, Gail, if you want to go through a couple more items, and then maybe, I don't know if there's a list we can just go through at the end, or just list off a few other.
Yeah, I was going to say one of them that I wanted to touch on was the change in where you manage worksheets. If you need to move or delete individuals from worksheets, up to this point, you had to do them one at a time. And now you can select and do a list. So you can, move several people from one to another and also delete. So just something, it's the little things that make our lives easier. So this would be one of those little things, especially if you're the one that's managing, moving people between worksheets. Another, just something that's really nice is on the monitor jobs, you can now see the job owner on the monitor compensation jobs screen. So you can know if there's more than one of you that are working on administrating your plan and running different tools. You can now see who owns those different jobs that might be running. And I think the final one that I have has to do with the compensation plan activity audit. The search box that you have to look into to find what sheet you want to run the audit on. You can now start typing, and it'll be an autocomplete. Before you had to scroll to find things. So once again, it's those little things that just make our lives easier. So, but I think that's it for. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on, Bryan?
I don't think there's anything else we need to go in depth on, but let me just read off a couple of the other admin enhancements. One of them is for reporting. You now, there's some changes to the way that you can report on compensation eligibility. These changes were put in place, or this change actually was put into place to support one of the things we talked about at the very beginning of the call, which is the ability to do the custom eligibility and be able to use custom fields and define who's eligible for particular kind of, there's now the reporting on that as well. Just like always in the past, there's been reporting on the standard fields and who was eligible and who wasn't. There's also what I almost consider a bug fix more than an enhancement. Last year, there was a functionality introduced that we can use custom MDF objects to pull in information, yet they overlooked the fact that a lot of MDF objects used underscores in the name of the MDF object, and that wasn't supported. And so they fixed that. So now that will be there. And then the last one on my list was if you were to ever recall statements, when you go to recall, before it would prompt you and ask, do you really want to recall? But that was it. Now it's going to ask you, do you really want to recall? You're going to be recalling 763 statements, or however many statements there are that you're recalling. So it gives you that piece of information before you actually click the button to say, yes, I want to recall all those. And that's probably it for the list. There's a few other items, but we really considered them really minor. We think we tried to cover most of the major ones, and then I guess open it up to whatever questions we have.
Yeah. It looks like we do have a question.
I'll answer Steve's last one. I see Steve, you asked a question about the granular role-based permission used for compensation. So those of you that may have been paying attention all along when the release was first announced, they were going to force everyone to go to what's called granular permissions. You would know if you have granular role-based permissions if when you go to the manage permission roles and you look at permissions for a particular role, if your permissions are split out into those for compensation, those for variable pay, and those that apply both to compensation and variable pay. Many customers have already upgraded to that. So if you have, fine, you're all set. If you hadn't, then in the preview release about a month ago, they moved everybody to that, and it did cause some issues. They weren't quite ready on the migration of the old way of handling those permissions to the new granular way. And so they actually backed that out of the production release. So that did not affect us this last weekend in the production release. Go ahead, Gail, if you want to. Have you looked at the other questions? Or?
Steve had another question about, the executive review can still only show up to 50 individuals versus the 100. I guess I wasn't aware of that. I thought it was both of them, but
I have to raise my hand. I'm not aware of that either, Steve.
I was not aware of that. I figured it went across the board, but I also haven't looked at the executive review that way yet. So, but
darn, I didn't know that either.
Steve,
if you could enter another note if you've actually seen this and tested it, or if you were actually asking us if it worked that way. Because I wasn't aware of that either, Gail.
Yeah, I wasn't aware there was anything different.
That's too bad, because it's one place that would really come in handy is an executive.
Oh yeah, especially when you're looking at everybody. So I'll have to look into that. All right, I don't know if there's any other questions. I don't see anything. All right.
I don't either.
Okay.
We'll give it maybe just another 30 seconds or so, and please go ahead and let us know if there is something else we could help you either answer or you'd like to discuss. Guess not.
If not, we like to make sure that everybody knows that our next LinkedIn Live session for Employee Central will be next week. I think it's on Monday. So if you're interested in that, please join us. Otherwise, thank you for joining us today. I appreciate you giving us your time, and have a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you very much.